Welcome to the Homeschool FlipHouse. I'm Mary Carmichael, a former house flipper, a second-generation homeschooler, and creator of homeschoolfliphouse.com, an interior design resource for homeschooling moms who want to create amazing spaces that they love being in and that inspires their children to learn and grow in virtue. Subscribe and like this video for more content like this. Now let's get started with today's video. We're talking about the effects of the environment on the learning experience. Can we harness the environment itself to motivate our children to learn? And if so, where do we start? Can something as simple as the light bulbs we choose have a significant impact on our homeschool learning environments? Our guest today thinks so. Randall Fielding is recognized as one of the world's foremost creative and innovative school architects. He's designed schools in 50 countries, ranging from early childhood education to the university level and everything in between. He has become an internationally recognized thought leader in school design and received numerous awards, including the top 2 most prestigious international awards in school planning and design bestowed by the Association for Learning Environments. He is a founding partner of Fielding International and co-author of the book, The Language of School Design. His mission is to design schools where children thrive, and he says that learning, not buildings, comes first in his architecture. Randy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mary, for that kind introduction, and a shout out to all of you in the audience. I'm happy to be here, happy to help.
I want to start with a question. How does a philosophy of education or the goals that we have for learning impact the design of a learning space?
You might think about learning environments like an ecosystem. And for an education ecosystem to be effective, we need to align the vision, human capacity, and the environment. All 3 work together, just as the sun and the rain and a seed are needed for a plant to grow. So vision includes student outcomes and goals, the educational program and core beliefs. Human capacity includes the experience, mindset, and definition of teacher and student roles. The environment includes the local culture, the neighborhood, interior and exterior architecture, and the approach to time and scheduling. They're all critical to be effective.
And what can you say generally about the effects of an environment on the learning experience and how a space can actually connect a child to the curriculum?
Power of place. Environment is just core to all of us. And I'd say when we relate it to learning environments, connecting it to a core principle in education is important, and that would be personalization. Effective learning means that we're personalizing the learning for each student. So it follows that we all experience space and place differently as well. For some learners, time alone at a computer or in a library for long periods of time is nurturing. For others, building something, going someplace, interacting with other people is essential. For many students, a fairly equal balance of collaborative, active, and individual time is best.
Can you comment on what are the basic or universal elements of designing a learning space that we should all be considering, whether we're designing them for an institution, public, private, or for a home education setting?
We might start with 3. And the first one would be variety. And that applies to lighting, but it also applies to spatial organization in general. Interestingly, many homes are more varied than schools. A lot of schools have 2 kinds of spaces, classrooms, corridors. But in your home, you probably have a larger bedroom, a smaller bedroom, a family room, or living room, dining room, maybe a garden. That's great. That's something you can leverage. So we think about variety of spaces. We also want to relate that to variety in lighting. So you want general lighting. So if you look here behind me, you see some pendant lights on an angle, and they're bouncing half the light up and half the light down. That's general lighting. Gives us a fairly good even light here at the desk. Daylighting is so important. You can see here in this space that I'm in, we've really emphasized and designed for daylighting. The more daylight, the better. Permeability. So that is, we're designing for lighting where you're seeing from one space into another. Just as during the day we want different kinds of moods and activities, I can look out all the way to the front outside, and there's a brighter light. And if I were to look this way, I see a smaller, cozier space with a lower light level. And so that connection between the spaces is very important. That would be about permeability and the different lighting levels. And then the last thing I would say is choice. Choice relates to personalization and space and lighting. Can I choose to have a lower lighting level? Let's say 10-foot candles, or a higher lighting level might be 50-foot candles, where I want to build something and I want to see small things. That's tremendous and so important for all learners.
You know, what you just explained remind me of something in your book that you wrote, where you said that lighting can actually impact different learning styles. And I want to hone in on that a little bit, because one of the biggest challenges as a mom is being one person who handles the challenges of all these different temperaments and personality types. So I knew, okay, yes, our children learn differently, but I didn't really think that a variety of lights could affect their learning styles. So can you comment a little bit on that concept more?
So it goes back to that key concept in education of personalization again. So our lighting needs are going to vary times of day, personality, our own experience, where we come from, and our age. So younger kids, for example, often are going to have a greater need for a sense of control. They can't always control all their limbs or their environment or what they eat or when they get up. So they want to have some control. So giving that opportunity for a variety of lighting, we talked about earlier, that point of choice is so important. And if we think about what that varied lighting might be, you could see, for example, people who are larks versus owls, morning people.
Right.
Morning people might want to wake up and then experience a lot of activity, a buzz. They might want to go outside and run or walk or go to a coffee shop that's noisy with a lot of light and a lot of stimulation.
Right.
On the other hand, people who are owls might wake up later and say, just kind of leave me alone for the first hour and a half. Okay, I don't need a lot of light. I don't need a lot of stimulation. And that's not about age. That's actually about nature versus nurture.
What about the effects of different kinds of light on children who have perhaps ADD or ADHD? Is there any information on that?
Yeah, I've certainly heard, because we've designed many spaces which have sensory isolation type rooms, and what we're seeing again, this need for control with people with ADHD is greater than others. We all want that control, but it might be emphasized. And so, for example, a lot of the learning environments that we do have learning studios, which is another word for classrooms, a little more agile, that open up to these learning common areas. And we'll often have overhead doors or movable doors. And what we'll find for people with ADHD, they're good in those environments, but they may need that choice at times where you have some opacity. You're not always seeing, you're not always having that level of stimulation. It's not that they can't handle, they'll want stimulation, but they may need more control over that. So for example, a sliding barn door allows you to open up, and it also allows you to close and not be seen. Or, many of the special ed teachers we've looked at first said, oh, we want high windows because we don't want kids to be distracted. And I'll say, how about if we had a low window that went right down to the floor, but the view was to a green garden? Yeah. They said, oh, no, that's fine. I just don't want them to be looking at, a parking lot or kids playing basketball. And so
sure,
I think actually all of us would like a window to a green garden, and we all have varied levels of need for stimulation, depending on the time of day, age, and our nature. Actions. I think people with ADHD can be incredibly inspired by music and dance, for example, which is very, could be looked at as high stimulation.
Yeah.
Right. But you need to have that at the right time.
Right. Right.
And whereas other people may be able to manage their emotions a little better. So it may not feel like the right time for some people, but okay, I can cope with that. Whereas someone with ADHD or someone very young may need to have more control and say, okay, now is not the time for all that stimulation. So we need to give them choice in the environment, it's choice in learning, choice in the curriculum, choice in activities, and choice in the environment and lighting.
How should we sort of evaluate our existing spaces and the lighting in our existing spaces in the home to optimize them for our education
We'll
experience?
start with variety. So we want some general lighting. There are times you want to light the space you're in. So as you move around, you have a good lighting level. And you can get when I'm talking about lighting levels, you can download either a free light meter at on your phone, or for $3 you can get a pro level. And it's a great project for kids to be able to look at that. At the pro level, you can actually see it in foot candles or in lux. So, general lighting, school design institutionally for many years said you should have 55-foot candles at the desk level, just 30 inches above the floor, which they borrowed from factories. And it's just killer lighting level. It's ridiculous. And I've debunked that over the years. You might have 55-foot candles if you have a STEM classroom where kids are doing some kind of very intense electronic work for a little while, but generally a lighting level of 30 is quite a good general lighting level. 30, 35, I would say probably not over 40. But then you want lighting level in your home or your school, which is lower. It could go down to 10-foot candles. And again, it's fun to just hold your light meter on your phone and learn about that. It's very interesting to see how it changes. And you also want, then sometimes you want feature lighting. So for example, as you're in a space, you don't want sameness. You want stimulation. Having a stimulus-rich environment is something we know from research on the brain is good for learning. So we don't want that sameness. And again, those old, school guidelines, it says 55-foot candles as a desk level everywhere is a factory kind of thing. It doesn't make any sense for learning. So you might actually want to have a wall 15 feet away or 25 feet away. Let's say you're in a living room and put feature lighting on there that's 60-foot candles and maybe has a background color. So what that does is make the space really dynamic. You're in the space you're at with 20, 30, and you want to move towards that color. You're attracted towards it, and it makes the space actually feel more dynamic. Then another kind of lighting would be ambient. You've got a great example right behind you, ambient lighting. I mean, it provides light, but also you're creating a mood with it. It's an expression of who you are as a person, Mary, and it's great. It matches well with your painting and with even your necklace. It's got the glitter. Yeah, so that's ambient. It's not necessarily about how many foot candles, but that it creates a kind of a mood. So that's terrific for a school or for a home. Have the varied lighting levels, and then. I'd say one of the most challenging ones then is to have also high color rendition index lighting. And so that's different from the lighting level. That would be a CRI of 100 would be sunlight. Our old fluorescent fixtures, you wouldn't have those in your home, but you maybe went to school with them, were about 60. And so when, it's very important to have a fuller spectrum. Will give you a sense of you'll try more with a full.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that for a second, because when I go into a store to buy a light bulb, I feel just overwhelmed. The choices are incredible, and it's not simple anymore. And then if you dig in deeper, you find out you should even take into consideration the kind of fixture that you're going to have the light bulb in. How can we kind of simplify the criteria for choosing a light bulb? If you're going into a store and you're buying some of this, maybe not for ambient lighting, but for some of the task or feature lighting that you've been talking about, what would you consider to help simplify that massive choice that can just feel overwhelming?
So if you just go back to variety, I would get different brightnesses. So, lights, not all at the same intensity, but then color rendition index. So lamps in the last, even at a place, at general retail stores, have begun to actually post their CRI. And whereas I used to see, CRIs of 60s and not published at all, now you're seeing them at 80 plus. And that helps. The higher, the better. I would recommend looking for a CRI of 95 to 98.
Okay.
And that sounds really high, but to illustrate, it's a little complex. What the color rendition index does is it's an average of about 16 different color spectrums, all the way from, say, a light cream color or brown to a red, purple, blue, green, all of those. So imagine 16 different colors. And when you measure the color rendition index, it's an average. So you could actually get a lamp that's an 83 CRI, which has almost no red in it at all. It's been removed, and therefore your face is going to look pale. And you'll see that with a lot of LEDs today. You know, LEDs are fairly new. Incandescents happen to be good on the red spectrum. So even though you see, oh, it's 83 CRA, I should buy that. If you can look and find out what the actual CRI is of the different colors, you might have to go online to do that. It's not necessarily one trip to the retail store. Figure out what you want. Look at the specs on the website and see if they can measure that. If you get what a photographer would have, a meter, you can actually see. Actually, if you want, I can share screen and show you.
Yeah, I would love that.
Show you what one of them looks like. All right.
That'd be great.
Because it's a little technical. It's not only not something that individual homeowners do, but very few, I have to say very, very few educators or school designers are seeing. So let me see if I can share screen here. Yeah. So you notice how it says 83.7?
Right.
So that's really high. So you might say, wow, high CRI, it's 3.7, I'm gonna buy that. And you can see the number of the color rendition index for each one of these 16 colors, but look at the red.
Yeah.
It's 11.
Wow.
So if you get a lamp like that, food and people are not gonna look very good.
That's so interesting. That's incredible.
That's something that I think is going to continually improve every year. LED lights have improved remarkably in the last 5 years, and they're going to continue to. And so it'll be easier to get a high CRA fixture that actually has good reds in it. And it's not impossible. There is you had asked me earlier, there is a brand called Sora, SORRA. And you could go online and they have very high color rendition index lamps. You're not going to see them at every retail store, but it'd be interesting to look at.
Oh yeah, I'm very interested. That's fascinating to be actually able to see the spectrum measurement right there like that. Okay, well, as long as we're on the subject of bulbs, what about incandescent bulbs? I've heard they're best for one's body and that the LED bulbs can mess with the eyes and sleep cycles. Can you comment on that? Is that legitimate?
I'd be happy to comment on that. So first, when we talk about us as individuals, I think we are part of an ecosystem. And in order for our Earth to survive, we need to move to LEDs. They last 25 times longer.
Right.
And an incandescent. They're 75% more efficient. It's now not allowable by code in a lot of commercial and institutional buildings to go with incandescent. So I think it makes sense for us to embrace LEDs, which keep improving incredibly every year. I'm not aware of research that's saying LEDs are messing with our sleep cycles. What I do hear and see is that the cooler tones can, and brighter lights. So what you want to do is be able to control it. And there's lots of control in LEDs. You want dimmable LEDs, which is not difficult. You could go to a retail store now for your house and buy a standard lamp that allows you bulb, you call it, has a little switch that can go from low, medium, high, and actually has different colors and brightnesses on it. So you want the less bright one is going to be warmer, and that's going to be better at night. It's not going to mess with your sleep cycle, and it's an LED and 75% more efficient.
I came across a study by an institute in Korea, actually, that was talking about the Kelvin level. I think that if it was higher for a short period of time, you could have an optimal testing experience, but that if you if you kept that level for a long period of time, it kind of peaked and exhausted the student a little bit, if I understood it right. And again, going back to your point about variety, that the dimmable was a preference. You should have a brighter level for tests and a lower level for more relaxed learning. Can you comment on that?
Sure, happy to. So you can get 5,000 Kelvin lamps. I've been using them for 15 years, and they're quite available now. That's high. That's close to sunlight.
Yeah, right.
Sunlight is actually brighter and a little more towards the blue. And it's not just for a test. I think, a bright 5,000 K is good for all sorts of things. Whenever you want to buzz, you want to be active. It's like being outside in the sun. But if you're tired, if you're ready to go to bed, you're not going to go outside in the sun, right? That wakes you up. So it's not that the high Kelvin is actually good. So you'll see lamps consumer level 2,700 to 3,400. Sometimes you pay a little more, 5,000. But that 3,300, 3,400 can a high quality, high color rendition index fixture can still have red in it. Can still be a really good color. The lower Kelvin 2,700, which you'll see readily available, that's a little cheaper fixture that is also not too bright. I guess that's a pretty, there's an algorithm there between color temperature and color rendition index and brightness levels. But I would say don't look at high Kelvin lights as negatively at all.
Okay.
They're all good. It's just like all colors are good.
Okay.
And low light is good, bright light is good. What you don't want, you want to minimize your low CRI, your low color rendition index.
Okay. What would you do with the challenge that a lot of us have where we are using a basement room, for example, to homeschool in, and we don't have any natural light? Can you help us out on that?
Great question. Sure. So one, I'd go for variety of lighting, have ambient lighting, have feature lighting, have general lighting, and then I would create some movement and dynamic in that space. So since you can't see out, so it's not just natural light, but it's the ability to go out psychologically, gives you a feeling, that you have that control and choice.
Right.
And also, we all tend to look up frequently, and we look up to change our focal length. And if we can focus on something a distance away, it actually relaxes our eyes. It's a physical characteristic. So the smaller the space, the harder it is to look up and focus out. But in a basement, for example, take your furthest wall and give that a higher lighting level. You might give it a deeper, more interesting color. Put something on it to look at so that you're looking up and it gives you that sense of a vista. Ideally, we'd love a long vista, to trees, right? But a vista that's more than, 3 feet, 5 feet, 10 feet, that's even 15 feet, with a different lighting level, gives you a lot of the benefits of having windows. And then if you get high color rendition index lamps, and you can also get some of the benefits of daylight. So there might be times that you want that 5,000 Kelvin light, right, which is going to give you a lot of the feelings of sunlight.
That's so interesting. It reminds me of a study that I came across from the Happiness Research Institute, and they did a study on the level of residential home spaces, and because a lot of us have the perception that, well, if I have more space, I'd be happier. And they came to the conclusion that it wasn't the amount of space that affected happiness, but the perception of the space. And based on what you just said about how to minimize that sort of claustrophobic, non-choice feeling in a basement, I bet that would have a lot to do with the way the space is lighted. What if you have a really small space? Maybe you do have some natural light. Is there a way that we can create a different perception of that space with the lighting that we use in small spaces?
Well, you can maximize how much of that light is reflected in the space. The highest LRV light reflectance value is going to be 100. As you use deeper colors, it's going to go down to 30 or 40, your dark colors.
Right.
So if you can keep your LRV index to 70 or above, you're going to bounce a lot more light. So it's going to feel brighter and it's going to feel more light.
Do you start by picking the fixture or the bulb?
Well, in a homeschool, I would say start with what you have.
Right.
And then, you're not designing it from scratch, and then look at what kind of base you have. So for example, I mentioned that company Sora makes very high color rendition index lamps. Well, you can get those for a standard base, just like an incandescent base. They're LEDs, they're dimmable, high color rendition index. So look at what you have, and then you can see what kind of lamps you can get for it. I think they're both equally important. So the type of lamp, whether it's more like a spot that's giving you feature lighting, or it's more of a general lighting, or it's more ambient lighting, that has a big impact. But the lamp is equally important. So I think you could start from either. Make sure you always look at both.
Interesting. Okay. What about the time of the year or the direction of our windows? Should that affect our lighting design at all?
Yeah, and that's a huge part of architecture and what makes spaces great, particularly in the northern hemisphere, and as we get further north, having more south-facing, more east and west, more direct light is so important. And there's so many people who have seasonal affect disorder, and they need more light. And so our buildings can get more light, or at a homeschool, may have the opportunity to spend more time outside. For almost everyone, more natural light is going to be better. Now, if you're below the equator or in a very hot area, we're going to focus, more on shade and more diffused light. Direction that you're facing, all directions are wonderful. So like north light, traditionally you hear it's great for artists. It's much easier to manage north light. If, let's say you're doing art, glare can be difficult to control. And one thing that we see usually done badly in schools is window treatments. Actually, people typically do better in their homes with window treatments than schools. Schools will often put in blinds, and teachers will have the blinds closed because it's easier than opening and closing them. And so they're missing the value of natural light, but glare is a problem to manage. Whereas you might have some curtains that are still light filtering at home. That's great. Have as much light as you can, unless it's creating glare, and then look for curtains or blinds, but preferably those kind of shades that let some light through. And you've probably seen they now have these wonderful up, down, up kind of shades, where you can bring the shades up from the bottom and still have a view and light from above, and still give you some privacy. So you can still have part of your window have natural light coming in, but block the part that's giving glare, and still have the some filtered light coming through, which is great.
You may have already touched on this, Randy, but do you have any thoughts on natural full spectrum sunlight therapy lamps?
I think they're great. They've changed a lot. 10 years ago, they were likely to be a fluorescent with a very high color rendition index. Now they're going to be LEDs. One thing that I might suggest is, instead of limiting yourself to a box light, which you can get online where you're going to be kind of glued to it, is you can actually get a more full spectrum lamp. What they're doing in light therapy is giving you a higher spectrum, so higher Kelvin level. They're 5,000 K lights. Okay, so get a 5,000. It's not hard to get those now. And you can have them in a fixture overhead, for example, and have an exercise bike beneath it. So you're moving, you're exercising, you're not just sitting there. Because while light is an important therapy for us, most people that have SAD and need light therapy also respond really well to exercise and movement. And the best thing for light therapy, of course, is to go outside.
Right.
If you possibly can. If you can't do that, consider getting high Kelvin, high temperature lights, and putting them above, and so that you can move about.
Randy, you have taken what is a very complicated, overwhelming, sometimes topic, and you have really simplified it for us. And I really appreciate it. Thank you for being an excellent guest. Where can people find out more about you and your work?
We'll go to our website, Fielding International.
Excellent. All right. I'm Mary Carmichael, creator of homeschoolfliphouse.com. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, please comment, subscribe, and be on the lookout for more videos like this.